It's the question that drives us, Neo. It's the question that brought you here. You know the question, just as I did.
What is the Matrix?
Well, Keanu, there are a lot of answers to that question, but today we're going to be talking about The Matrix as in the 1999 film written and directed by Lana and Lily Wachowski. It's one of the most important, popular, and influential movies of the past 20 years, but these days its legacy seems to be pretty much all based on a few surface-level things. Bullet time, black leather, and generally improving the quality of Hollywood fight scenes. What gets overlooked is that The Matrix is an astoundingly well-made movie, with some serious filmmaking craft that's worth studying. For all the cool, badass aesthetic elements, it's unlikely it would have become such a phenomenon if it didn't have such effective storytelling. Watching this movie, you realize how much care the Wachowskis put into every frame of it. There isn't a shot or edit that doesn't serve a clear purpose. Nothing is haphazard, everything is precise. I could honestly make a 5-hour series analyzing the filmmaking in The Matrix, but for now I want to focus on a small element of it. One that back in 1999, nobody left the movie theater excitedly talking about, but one that's an essential part of what makes the movie work. The scene transitions. If you break it down, movies are a collection of scenes, and the transition points between scenes are a major opportunity for a filmmaker to control the pacing, to impart information, or to give the audience subconscious clues. Most scene transitions that you see work kinda like this. A conversation in one scene ends, then cut to an establishing shot with a new location, then start a new dialogue scene there. That does the job, and there's nothing wrong with it, but there's so much more that can be done. The first act of The Matrix is split into 8 sections. There's the cold open with Trinity, then Neo at his apartment, then Neo meeting Trinity at the club, then Neo at the office, Neo being interrogated, the car ride with the bug extraction, meeting Morpheus, and waking up in the real world. This act follows Neo entering 2 new worlds, the metaphorical world of Morpheus and Trinity and their little group, and then the actual real world. The way the act is structured, Neo keeps taking steps into Morpheus' world, then stepping back into his own. So he'll go to the club, then back to his ordinary apartment and office. Then he'll be interrogated by Agent Smith, then back home again. And when you look at the whole act laid out like this, you realize that every other scene starts the same way, with Neo waking up. The idea of waking up is basically a mantra in this movie.
You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he is expecting to wake up.
I mean, the final scene is set to the song Wake Up by Rage Against the Machine. And along with waking up, there's the recurring idea of dreaming.
You ever have that feeling where you're not sure if you're awake or still dreaming?
So before these are actually discussed in the dialogue, how does the movie lay the groundwork for these ideas? Through the transitions. When Neo decides to follow the White Rabbit and go to the club, literally taking his first step out of his mundane existence into this new world, the transition emphasizes this by cutting from the stillness and silence of one moment.
Yeah. Sure. I'll go.
To the exact opposite. Immediately we're hit by movement and a wall of sound, which make it clear that we're in a very different place. And how does the movie shift us back at the end of the scene? Well, during the scene, the background music subtly shifts from Dragula to Minefields by The Prodigy.
Who are you?
My name is Trinity.
As Neo's conversation with Trinity reaches its end, the music builds, with a repeated noise that seems like it's part of the music, but that we will momentarily realize is his alarm clock. That sound bridges the 2 scenes, guiding us from one into the next, giving us a moment of humor and building on the dreamlike feeling. Since the alarm cut off the previous scene and we never saw Neo leave the club and go home, it makes us wonder, was that just a dream? Skip ahead to the end of the interrogation scene and we get a similar transition. The bug pulls itself into Neo's belly button, and we cut to him waking up in bed as if from a nightmare. It's an effective cut because it uses the motion of both actions to connect them. The bug goes down, Neo sits up, and the 2 scenes are linked by the sound of his scream. But again, this cut straight into him waking up makes us wonder if that previous scene really happened. The final scene of Act 1 begins with Neo waking up again, but this time not in his bed. To get there, the camera, imitating Morpheus's words from earlier in the scene, essentially tumbles down a rabbit hole, and by rabbit hole, I mean Neo's throat. The shot plunges into blackness, and then, for the first time in his actual body, Neo wakes up. Before this, each time he had woken up, he had stepped a little further into a new world. And now as he wakes up, he has entered it completely. Okay, I want to jump back and talk about the movie's first two transitions, the ones on either end of the cold open where Trinity escapes the agents. The first begins with the camera moving through the three-dimensional space of computer code, through a void, and into the hallway filled with police officers. The following one has the camera diving into the mouthpiece of a phone, then pulling out through the screen of Neo's computer. On first viewing, those seem like examples of the impossible CGI-aided camera move that became popular in the late 90s, but the truth is that they're providing important visual information that will make sense later on, and especially on a second viewing. We learn that the Matrix code actually makes up everything in this world, as exemplified by Cypher's line,
I don't even see the code. All I see is blonde, brunette, redhead.
And of course what Neo sees in the climactic scene. So by moving through the code and into a tangible world, the transition is creating a link in our minds between the two. And same thing with the second transition, as the movie is giving us a clue by having the camera travel through the phone, just as the characters travel through the phone back into the real world. So when this transition is used again in the final scene, as the shot moves through the code and out through the mouthpiece of a phone, this time we understand what it means. Let's skip ahead. In Act 2, things slow down a bit, as Neo spends a lot of time learning about the history of the Matrix and how things work. But when the Wachowskis want to pick up the pace, they use transitions to do it. Several of these are what David Bordwell refers to as the hook, an audio-visual texture linking an element from the end of one scene to one at the beginning of the next. So when Neo utters his classic line,
I know Kung Fu,
Morpheus replies,
Show me.
and with a flash to white accompanied by a sound effect, we're now in a dojo with both of them clad in martial arts attire. Our minds immediately connect the iconography of the location and clothes to Neo's previous lines, so this jump forward makes sense to us. It's efficient storytelling. A few scenes later, in the agent training program, there's a similar transition with a line of dialogue providing a hook to a new scene. Morpheus gets a phone call, Tank says,
We got trouble.
and boom, we're suddenly mid-chase, with the music announcing the urgency of the situation. There's a lot of talking in this section of the movie, which isn't a complaint. I think this is an example of really effective exposition, but it's important that the Wachowskis know when to use these transitions to pick up the pace and grab our attention. Further ahead in the act, transitions are employed to emphasize Cypher's betrayal. In the scene where he chats with Neo, they drink a gross homemade alcohol.
Good shit, huh?
The only thing available to them in the real world. Then, as the scene ends, Cypher says,
Sweet dreams.
again making an allusion to the Matrix as a dream world, as we have a quick shot of the Matrix code and then a close-up of juicy, delicious steak, a sharp contrast to the beverage of the previous scene. And for the transition into the next scene, the film cuts straight into a shot of whatever this goop is that they're eating. It's using food in these transitions to draw a contrast between the two worlds, underlining Cypher's decision. Let's move on to the third and final act. This one is pretty linear, since while the previous acts take place over days, this takes place over maybe a couple hours. So the transitions pretty much follow the action, but there are some that are really interesting. Check out how music is used as we cut from Smith's monologue into Neo arriving in the lobby.
you're going to die.
There's this metallic percussion that's synced exactly with Neo's footsteps. Because of the link between the sound and the action, our mind connects the two, and since the sound began in the previous scene, it retroactively gives the impression of Neo marching forward concurrently with Smith talking. Much of this sequence is split between two lines of action, Neo and Trinity moving through the building, and the agents with Morpheus in the interrogation room. To create a link between the two, the Wachowskis used some clever transitions. This explosion occurs in the lobby, making the sprinklers turn on in the room, so the transition is a cause and effect between the two scenes. Then, as it shifts locations again, one scene ends with a close-up of this agent, as it cuts to a close-up of this guy, linking the two in our minds because momentarily, that agent will take over his body. Way back when I was in middle school, The Matrix was the movie that made me want to make movies. If you had asked me why at the time, I would have told you something about how awesome it was and how much I loved the fight scenes. All of that is still true, but what I definitely couldn't articulate back then is that a large part of why this movie is so engaging is that you're watching two filmmakers in total control, using every tool at their disposal. The Matrix is a pretty ambitious movie. In a little over 2 hours, it has to establish multiple levels of reality, the mythology of a future world, its rules, create a mystery, and also tell an exciting action thriller story. For that to work, its storytelling needs to be efficient, and this is a great example of how much heavy lifting can be accomplished simply by knowing when to end a scene and what shot to start a new one on. This is a testament to what can be done when you refuse to be lazy with your filmmaking. Oh, and check out how they use a match cut to quickly move us between two planes of reality.
This will feel a little weird.
That's good stuff. Hello guys, and thank you for watching. Now, halfway through making this, I remembered that there's a really good Nerdwriter video about the transitions in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. And it takes a totally different angle than this one, there's no real overlap between the two, but I wanted to mention it anyway because if you haven't seen it for some reason, you should check it out. There's a link down there. Now, I actually almost made this video about a totally different aspect of The Matrix, and I'm considering still making that video. So if you want to see it, let me know. And if you like the videos we're making, and you want to help us make them bigger and cooler, you should check out our Patreon. We're now available to patrons. You can watch the wacky movies I made in high school. If you want to get updates on what we're working on and yell at me about anything, there's the social media links. And I will see you here next Wednesday. Also, I pretty much never use my Tumblr for anything other than posting these videos. Is there anything I could be using it for? Is there like supplementary material I could put there that you'd want to see? Let me know.